Hi friends, let us today learn about Russian Revolution and few question and answers. So question 1. What are the important dates of Russian Revolution? Answer is, important dates of Russian Revolution are from 1850 to 1880 there were debates among people over socialism in Russia. In 1898, formation of Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party. In 1905, there was an event known as a Bloody Sunday and it led to the revolution of 1905. On 2nd March of 1917, abdication of Tsar happened. Tsar is the king of Russia and the Russian Revolution of February 1917 happened. On the 24th October of 1917, the Bolshevik uprising in the Petrograd happened. And from 1918 to 1920, we had the civil war in Russia. In 1919, there was a formation of Comintern by the Bolsheviks. And in 1929, we had the beginning of Stalin's collectivization program. These are the important dates in Russian Revolution. Question 2. Who are the conservatives? How were they different from liberals/radicals in 1900s? Answer. Liberals or radicals wanted to give common people power and abolish monarchy immediately. Conservatives preferred older methods and wanted change slowly. Question 3. List two differences between capitalist and socialist/communist ideas of private property. Socialists or communists want all property to be owned by all people, whereas the capitalists want property to be owned by few wealthy individuals. Number 2. Socialists or communists wanted revenues or profits to be shared by all people, whereas capitalists wanted the profits accumulated with owners of the industries. Question 4. Name some people who supported socialism or communism. People who supported socialism/communism were Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels and Louis Blanc. Question 5. Name few social political parties in Europe during 1900s. So social parties during 1900 were the Labour Party in Britain and Socialist Party in France. Who ruled Russia during 1914? Tsar Nicholas II. Tsar is a Russian version of the king, ruled Russia during 1914. What religion were there in Russia during 1914? Majority religion was Russian Orthodox Christianity and others were Catholic, Protestant, Islam and Buddhism. What were the social, economic and political conditions in Russia before 1905? 85% of Russian people were agriculturists. Russia exported grains. Prominent industrial areas were St. Petersburg, which was later renamed as Petrograd, and Moscow. In 1890s, Russian railway network was extended and factories were set up. Coal, iron, steel production increased during 1890s. Factory workers used to work very hard, 10 to 15 hours per day. Metal workers considered themselves better than others because it required more skill. Women made up of 31% of the workforce, but they were paid less than men. Workers were united during strikes for better working conditions and better pay, etc. The peasants who cultivated the land, mostly the land was owned by nobility and monarch. Sometimes peasants used to refuse to pay rent and they killed the landlords. So peasants in this case were aggressive. What did mir mean? Okay, so the peasants used to pool their land together and their community, which was called mir, M-I-R in Russian, divided the land produced according to needs of individual families who shared that land. Which were some of the socialist parties groups in Russia during 1900s? So Social Democratic Workers' Party was founded in 1898 by socialists who respected Karl Marx's ideas. Socialists among peasants formed Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1900. The Bolshevik group led by Lenin, who wanted to support and include only poor peasants, was one of the parties. And the Mensheviks group, who wanted to support all peasants, whether they were rich or poor, was one more party. So these are the four parties which were socialistic parties slash groups in Russia during 1900s. Why were there revolutionary disturbances in Russia in 1905? What were the demands of the revolutionaries? So in 1904, the prices of essential goods rose very quickly. It was a burden on the workers. In 1905, 110,000 workers in St. Petersburg went on strike, demanding the working day to be 8 hours and an increase in wages and improvement in working conditions. The strike was led by Father Gapon. Police attacked the strikers and unfortunately killed 100 workers and wounded 300. This incident is called Bloody Sunday and it is the start of 1905 revolution. What was Duma? Due to 1905 revolution, the Tsar or the king allowed creation of elected parliament called the Duma. The Tsar placed severe restriction on political activity of this Duma because he did not want any reduction in his power. And the Tsar dissolved first Duma in 75 days, second Duma in 90 days and the filled third Duma with his supporters. Which nations fought with each other in the First World War? The First World War fought from 1914 to 1918 was fought between Germany, Austria and Turkey, which were the central powers on one side, versus France, Britain and Russia on the other side. What happened to Russia during the First World War? So Russian armies were defeated by Germany and Austria along the Western Front, because Western Front they were standing and fighting and the losses were incredible. So 7 million casualties happened, unfortunately. Russian army burned down the crops and buildings to stop German army from advancing into Russia. Okay, and the German army controlled the Baltic Sea and they cut off the industrial supplies to Russia. Okay, because of the burning down of crops, there was a food shortage in Russia, and the able men and the food were supplied to war, and in the cities Russians had food shortage and the people were very angry. February 1917 was a very cold time and added more burden to food supplies. On 22nd February 1917, 50 factories went on strike for better wages and food, and women played an important role, and this day came to be known as International Women's Day. On 27th February 1917, even the police and the cavalry joined the revolting people and they formed Petrograd Soviet Party. Okay. And finally, an advisory committee advised the Tsar to give up his throne, and he did so on 2nd March 1917. What happened in Russia between April and September 1917? So after Tsar gave up his throne, Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin returned to Russia. Lenin said that World War I be ended and the lands be transferred to peasants and the banks be nationalized. These are the three demands he did, and the factory workers started forming committees and trade unions to represent them. A provisional government in Russia which was sort of there to look after Russians after the Tsar tried to stop the Bolshevik demonstrations, but they were not successful. Peasants also formed committees for land distribution. What happened in Russia in October 1917? So Lenin convinced a military officer by name Leon Trotsky to join him and formed a military revolutionary committee. Okay, so this committee would do an uprising against the Tsar and capture power. Okay, on 24th October, the military captured the Winter Palace and government offices and seized power. What were the main changes brought about by Lenin and Bolsheviks immediately after the October Revolution? Industry and banks were nationalized. Land was seized from the nobility and it became a public property belonging to everyone. Large houses were partitioned and given to people according to the requirements of their families. New uniform for army was designed, including the Budyonovka hat, which was very popular, and that sort of made the soldiers a bit proud of themselves. Bolshevik party was renamed to Russian Communist Party. Peace agreement was signed with Germany, and Russia became one party state, and the secret police arrested anyone who argued against the Communist Party. Why did the Russian Civil War happen between 1918 and 1920? So after 1918, many soldiers in Russian military who were peasants, they left the army to claim their lands, because now the lands were being redistributed to peasants, right? So during 1918 and 1919, the former socialist revolutionaries who wore green uniforms, and the people who supported the Tsar or the king who wore the white uniforms, organized an army to fight the Bolsheviks who wore the red uniforms. Okay, so there was a war within groups within Russia. So the same people of the same country were fighting each other, which is why it is called a civil war. And looting and banditry and famine became common events. So the peasants who had seized land from the nobility were attacked by the people who supported the king, the pro-Tsarists. And the local non-Russian nationalities were attacked by Bolsheviks. So finally, by 1920, Bolsheviks controlled the entire Russian Empire. And in December of 1922, USSR, that is the Soviet Union, was created from the old Russian Empire. What were the results of Lenin's rule? So because of Lenin's rule, there was a process of centralized planning which gave 5-year plans. Government fixed all prices of goods and grains to promote industrial growth. Industrial production increased. However, working conditions were still poor and workers lived a very hard life. The healthcare and living quarters were provided, but they were not sufficient. Who was Stalin? What are the actions what actions did he take in Russia? So Stalin became head of Russian Communist Party after the death of Lenin. Stalin realized the rich farmers called kulaks were refusing to sell grains at government's fixed prices because they wanted some prices more than what government was able to pay them. Stalin realized that these small farms cannot be cultivated in a modern way. So from 1929, Stalin forced all the peasants to cultivate farms in a collective farms which were belonging to the state, which were called kolkhoz, and the cultivation profits were shared with the peasants. This made peasants very angry and they destroyed their own cattle and halted the production. Okay, so those who resisted collectivization of farms were severely punished by Stalin and they were also deported. But some bad harvests happened from 1930 to 1933, which led to a devastating famines in Russia in which 4 million died. Which of the Indians wrote books on Russian Revolution? So R.S. Avasthi wrote 2 books, Russian Revolution, Lenin, His Life and His Thoughts, and The Red Revolution. S.D. Vidyalankar wrote The Rebirth of Russia and Soviet State of Russia. Rabindranath Tagore was inspired by the improvements of life of peasants in Russia. In what ways was working population of Russia different from other countries in Europe before 1917? So Russians, 85% of them were agriculturists. This percentage was way more than other countries. For example, in other countries of Europe, only 50 to 60% were agriculturists, whereas in Russia, 85% were agriculturists. The peasants who were working in the farms were not fond of nobility. They who owned the lands. Sometimes the peasants killed the nobility. So in this way, peasants in Russia were different. Why did the Tsarist autocracy collapse in 1917? See, people were very angry at the shortage of food. Workers were very angry at working conditions and wages. Okay, the Tsarist autocracy was not able to help people overcome these issues, and there were huge losses due to World War I. Okay, so Bolsheviks led by Lenin at this point sought to bring in a radical change, and he wanted to help the people, and he helped to bring about collapse of the Tsarist autocracy. Make 2 lists: events in the February Revolution and events in the October Revolution. So in the February Revolution, on 22nd February 1917, 50 factories went on strike against low wages and bad working conditions. On 27th February 1917, revolutionaries and supporting military formed Petrograd Soviet Party. Okay, and on 2nd March 1917, Tsar gave up his throne. Okay. So in the October Revolution, on 16th October 1917, Lenin's Bolshevik and the Petrograd Soviet Party joined hands, and they also joined hands with the military. Okay. On 24th October 1917, Lenin and his military friend Leon Trotsky take control of government offices, and by December 1917, Lenin comes to power. So these are the events in the February Revolution as well as the October Revolution. Write a few lines what you know about kulaks, the Duma, women workers between 1900 and 1930, the liberals and Stalin collectivization program. So the kulak were rich peasants in Russia who wanted to sell goods at prices more than the government prices. Okay, they wanted to make profit. Duma was a provisional parliament set up in Russia after 1905 revolution to represent people. Women workers made up of 31% of workforce, but they were paid less than men. Right? During 22nd February 1917 factory strike, women workers also participated, and they played a very important role, due to which 22nd February came to be known as International Women's Day. Liberals were Russian people who wanted to change Tsar's monarchy and bring in socialism. Stalin's collectivization program is where Stalin realized that the small farms cannot be cultivated using modern methods. So Stalin forced the peasants who were working in the farm to work in a state-owned aggregated big farms called collective farms, which were also known as kolkhoz. Right? This led to modernization of agriculture, but the peasants were unhappy.
We have thoroughly studied, digested, thought about and simplified the concepts for you. So please like, share and subscribe.